Quiet Mystery Tales presents The Case of the Borrowed Man, a case from the private files of Mrs. Hilda Fenwick, a reimagined telling inspired by the classic Victorian ghost story tradition, told through an original frame narrator for this channel. Before I ever set down a word of this case, I want you to picture the ending first, because that is how I first heard it myself. A man is lying at the bottom of a disused excavation shaft near Baker Street, in the dark, with a broken arm, a broken leg, and 2 broken ribs. He has been there for hours. He is soaked in lamp oil, and when the men who find him lift a lantern to his face, he does not scream, and he does not beg for help. He weeps, quietly, and with what one of the rescuers later described to me as the relief of a man come home from a war nobody else could see. That man was a respectable London solicitor named Edmund Voss. 2 nights earlier, he had been sitting quietly in an armchair in his rooms at the Albany. What happened to him in between? What wore his face, walked in his shoes, and terrorized half of London under his name? Took me the better part of a year to piece together from his own account, and I am still not sure I believe all of it. I am not sure Mr. Voss entirely wants me to. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I did not begin this case with Mr. Voss. I began it with the porter at the Albany, a man named Griggs, whom I tracked down some years after the events themselves, in a small public house off Piccadilly, because I wanted the story from someone who had no stake in whether it was believed. Griggs remembered the night precisely, because it was the only time in 11 years of service that a tenant had come through his gate looking, in his words, like something wearing a man rather than a man himself. He described the laugh first, not because it was the loudest thing about that night, but because it was the thing that stayed with him. A gasping, delighted laugh, entirely wrong for the face producing it. He described the hands, fingers curled inward like a bird's claw, reaching for nothing in particular. And he described the single word, hissed rather than spoken, as Voss went past him into Vigo Street. Life. Griggs assumed a fit of some kind. A brainstorm, he called it. The sort of thing that took gentlemen suddenly, from overwork or drink or grief. It was only later, once the wreckage of the rooms was discovered, furniture overturned, ink dragged across the walls, a curtain still smoldering in the grate, that anyone thought to be frightened rather than merely embarrassed on Mr. Voss's behalf. I mention Griggs not because his account changes the facts, but because it fixes a single, useful point for us. Whatever happened to Edmund Voss that night, it did not look like madness to the one man who saw it happen at close range. It looked, he told me, like someone else entirely, delighted to be let out. Hold on to that phrase. It matters more than it seems to, just now. I will not walk you through every street Edmund Voss tore through that night, because the newspapers of the time did that badly enough already, and repeating a list of broken windows adds little beyond horror for its own sake. What matters is the shape of it, and the shape is this. A mild, careful, unmarried gentleman of business, a man known for his caution, not his temper, spent nearly 5 hours moving through London with a violence that none of his friends, his partners, or his own household staff could reconcile with anything they knew of him. His own colleague, a Mr. Charles Merritt, encountered him by chance near Covent Garden in the small hours and called out to him by name. Voss struck him across the face with a walking cane and ran on without so much as a flicker of recognition. Merritt told me, decades later, that the thing he could never explain to his own satisfaction was not the blow, it was the eyes. There was nobody home in them, he said. Not madness. Absence. I want to sit with that word for a moment, because it is doing a great deal of work in this story. Absence. Not a man overtaken by fury, but a man who was, in some sense that Victorian medicine had no vocabulary for, simply not there at all. By the time the sun rose, Voss had vanished as completely as he had appeared. Last seen along the Euston Road, and then nowhere. No sighting, no trace, for nearly 2 full days. And curiously, this is the detail that first drew me to the case. Years later, going through Dr. Wilson Paget's private papers, both Charles Merritt and Voss's business partner independently reported the same recurring dream on the nights Voss was missing, his face pale and pleading, trying and failing to speak to them. 2 grown men, unconnected by blood, dreaming the same stranger's face on the same nights, is the kind of coincidence that does not sit comfortably in a filing cabinet marked solved. I want to slow down here, because this is the part of the case file I have returned to more often than any other. On the 3rd day, out of options and out of patience with rational explanations, Merritt brought the matter to Dr. Wilson Paget, a man of genuine scientific standing who happened, at the time, to be hosting a medium of some reputation in his home. Merritt had not gone there in any spirit of belief. He told me plainly, years afterward, that he expected to be embarrassed and was prepared to be. Instead, before he had even finished explaining why he'd come, Dr. Paget stopped him and produced a slate. The sitting the night before had produced a message nobody in the room understood, in handwriting nobody in the room recognized, from a name nobody in the room had yet heard was missing. 8 words, a name, a location, a single, plain request for help. I have handled that slate myself. In the course of my research, Dr. Paget's family kept it, oddly, among his effects, and I confess that whatever my private opinions on mediums and séances generally, there is something genuinely unsettling about holding a piece of slate covered in a dead man's, no, forgive me, a missing man's, handwriting, obtained by a method he could not possibly have used himself, from a room he had never entered. The location it named was an abandoned excavation shaft near the new railway works on Baker Street, and that is where they found him, which returns us to the image I asked you to hold at the very start of this account. Here I must be careful, because what follows is not something I witnessed, nor something any independent party can verify. It is simply what Edmund Voss told me, and told others, consistently and without embellishment, for the rest of his life. A story he seemed to draw no pleasure from telling and never once altered in its essentials. He said that the experiment he and Merritt had been conducting, an attempt to project a phantom of himself across London by concentration alone, had actually worked. Not as an illusion, not as a trick of nerves. He said he genuinely stepped outside his own body and found himself in a vast, silent place laid directly over our own world, from which he could see London entire, every room, every street, like a lit city seen from a balloon, in his words, or a glass hive of ordinary lives going on beneath him, utterly unaware. He said the silence was the worst part, worse even than what came after, a world entirely without sound, because he was not alone there. He described, reluctantly, and always in the same careful language, drifting shapes with faces, hungry and shadowed, pressing close around anything living, anything with a way back into a body. Not the dead, he insisted, something closer to unlived, creatures whose only wish, whose only nature, was the desire to be let back into existence by any door left open to them. And he said that while he drifted there, distracted by wonder and then by fear, something else found the open door he had left behind. His own body, sitting empty in his armchair, was claimed by one of those hungry, formless things, while the true Edmund Voss watched, powerless, from just outside it, unable to get back in. For the better part of a day, by his account, he wandered that silent world trying to reach the 2 people who might help him, able only to brush at the edges of their minds, to trouble their sleep, to press against something he could only ever describe as glass. He found others there too, he said, dim shapes with human faces and no voices, adrift the same way he was. Men, he believed, though he could never be sure how they had come to be lost there, or whether the bodies they'd once worn still lived on without them, somewhere in the ordinary world. He reached the mediums sitting only once, he said, and only for a moment. Long enough, and no longer, to leave 8 words on a slate before the crowd of the desperate and the drifting pulled him away again. And when, near dawn, the thing wearing his body finally loosened its grip, exhausted, he thought, by the pain of the fall it did not know how to feel properly. Edmund Voss said he slid back into himself all at once, and the silence broke, and London's ordinary noise came flooding back in, and he lay at the bottom of that shaft weeping, not from the pain, though there was a great deal of that, but simply from the astonishment of being, once again, entirely and only himself. I have investigated a great many strange cases in my time, and I will tell you honestly, most of them dissolve, on close examination, into something ordinary wearing a frightening coat. This one has never quite dissolved for me. I cannot tell you what happened to Edmund Voss in that half hour before he came tearing out of the Albany. I can only tell you that 3 independent witnesses, a porter, a colleague, and a doctor with no reason to lie, each carried away a fragment of the same impossible night, and that none of their fragments ever contradicted each other, only completed one another, like pieces of a single broken slate. Make of it what you will. I have made my peace with not entirely knowing.